I'd like to introduce someone who was very essential to us in Ottawa during the convoy. He was an amazing spokesperson, and he was articulate, and it was something that our team needed, and he was an incredible team player. He's a former professor, and now he's a drifter, but I think he's got a very promising future. Everybody give a round of applause for Tom Marazzo.
Thanks. I know you guys are struggling to hear me back there. I'm going to do my best. Awesome. Right on. Thank you. So it's nice to see you all here. And what a better place to exercise your charter rights than here in the provincial capital, Toronto. The last time we did it in the nation's capital. This time we're here in the province's capital city, Toronto. As a retired veteran, I was again called to serve in the city of Ottawa, but with a few thousand new friends of mine that drove big giant trucks. I don't want to tell you how I got involved in the convoy. I want to tell you why I got involved in the convoy. In the early days of the pandemic, like so many, I knew that things didn't make sense. I simply knew that we were in a multi-generational fight for our very way of life. But as a soldier, I didn't know who my adversary was, or their tactics, or their capabilities. I knew that in time I would learn this. I just hoped that it wouldn't be too late. Our adversaries used their victims to protect themselves against free-thinking people and people that they couldn't control. They were masterful at locking us in our urban cages. They made us feel alone, and even worse, they used a lot of guilt to make us feel like we were a threat to our own family and our own friends and our elderly. When we were given our privileges by our elected representatives, it was a risk to talk to our families, our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors, for fear of being called a conspiracy theorist. For almost 2 years, I could not see a path out of this. I really couldn't. And then I heard about a truck convoy heading to Ottawa. Yeah. The truckers gave us a voice, hope, and they, again, restored our Canadian pride. Franklin Roosevelt said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear." Many of you had first-hand experience finding your moral courage to speak out against what you believe to be fundamentally wrong, when others believed it was right. In my experience, moral courage is just as scary as physical courage. After 2 years, we have the physical scars on our bodies and the moral scars on our hearts to show the pain that we have endured. But deep down, I believe we must accept a measure of responsibility for what has happened to us as a consequence of our complacency over the years. And we have become too cynical about politicians. But we must also acknowledge that we've been taken advantage of. And it's been by people in positions of power and public trust. In this province, our premier bragged about being the most restrictive place in North America. While denying his responsibility to us, the people of Ontario. Instead, he abdicated his responsibilities to unelected bureaucrats that no one had ever heard of. When you challenge the Ontario government with protest, supported by unbiased medical science, not political science, you were shouted down. For our courageous doctors and nurses, they were threatened and in most cases dismissed. When elected representatives spoke out against the Ontario Premier, they were immediately fired from his caucus, and the constituents were marginalized. This is not democracy or leadership. This is the action of a coward who turns his back on the people because he cannot not accept that he is wrong. Without reasonable cause, the government delegated their authority to unelected health authorities for the last 2 years. But Doug Ford cannot delegate responsibility for the harm that he has caused us over the last 2 years. I'm not going to be silent or uninterested in the political process anymore. In our own silence and cynicism about politics, it is our own cynicism about politics that allowed us all to be taken advantage of so easily, myself included. We naively trusted elected officials to take responsibility for too many decisions in our lives. We are today less free than we have ever been in our nation's history. I want to share with you a true story about my time in Ottawa when I learned our federal government had invoked the Emergency Act. I was sitting with Premier Brian Peckford, getting a personal tutorial on the spirit and the intent of how the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was meant to enshrine our values of freedom into supreme law for Canada as a true democracy. The irony of that moment will never be lost on me, because while I was receiving this lesson from the very last living author of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we were all losing those rights that we have by virtue of being Canadians. Weak leadership in our cities, provinces, and federal government have taken to places we should never have been. A fellow veteran of mine, Sammy, he said to me, the trucker convoy was the People's Emergency Act. My own fight continues, and as a retired Canadian military officer with 25 years of service, I am proud to join a group of retired veterans who have started an organization called Veterans for Freedom. Their mission is to rally Canadian Armed Forces veterans across Canada by mobilizing and sustaining lawful civic action in order to restore the fundamental rights and freedoms of Canadians. I feel a deep sense of duty to once again serve. I have never had political aspirations, but I think it is time that I accept the reality that I must continue to keep fighting for the Canada and the Ontario we once had. If we don't stop these governments and hold them accountable for what they have done, they will strip everything away from us. We will own nothing But I, for one, will not be happy about it, and nor should you. You already know the current political establishments have created despair through division. This has given way to our loss of confidence in our systems of medicine, law, police, military, education, places of worship in some cases, the Royal Canadian Legion, family, friends, and ourselves. Sadly, we have lost confidence in our sovereignty, where we have become a shell of our former glorious and free nation. Our institutions are no longer firm, and our inalienable rights have failed to protect us from our abusive governments. This cannot continue if we are to call ourselves a free nation. The only clear path that I can see for me going forward is to keep fighting for Canadians through the political process. On February 19th, on behalf of the truckers, I announced we would peacefully withdraw from the City of Ottawa. Exactly 1 month later, today, on March 19th, I am announcing that I am officially in the fight again as an Ontario Party candidate for the riding for Peterborough and the Kawarthas riding. Yeah. I will never be a politician. If elected, I will be a public servant. As a member of Provincial Parliament, the Ontario Party, which is why I joined, is based on the principle that the constituents come first. Not the party, not the leader. Therefore, I will act as a conduit for the people that believe in my integrity to serve. I will be their public representative, and I will serve their interests first. I have come to believe that local change has national impacts. I'd like to leave you with this final thought. I am speaking here today because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Many of you have heard them speak here today. These are courageous people who have led by example and possess unwavering moral courage that we can all learn to discover within ourselves. Our next speaker is a giant, and I've admired him for a very long time because of his dedication to his country, his community, and his family, and to you. He is my friend, and he is my brother, Danny Bulford. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is.